Pleased to be able to welcome you all to this evening's event. The Law Society has been debating changes to the way that it organises its council and the elections for council, and those decisions are up for discussion and for a vote, which starts on the 15th of December, so that we hope that this evening's event will go some way to helping you understand what these changes are about and helping you to make a decision before you cast your vote. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Donovan Lindsay, who is the Vice President of South London Law Society, and he will introduce the panel and chair this evening's event. So over to you, Donovan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and a warm welcome to the panel and also to everyone else who is listening to this. We hope it's going to be an invigorating discussion with balanced debate on both sides. As lawyers, one hopes that will be the way, and it will be quite a useful way to people to decide how they should vote. Now, there are a number of panel members, and the first person who's going to give his speak is Fraser Whitehead, who is for the reforms. And just to introduce you to Fraser, he is a senior member of the council and current chair of the Society's Council Membership Committee, former chair of the Police and Legal Affairs Committee, and former member of the board. He's been an active member of his local law society for 40 years, a former president, a current member of its main committee, and he supports strong local societies. And Fraser's view is that if the Law Society is to remain a voice of our rapidly changing profession, an effective council truly accountable, reporting regularly to and seeking guidance from that profession is essential. So on that note, I would like to hand over to Fraser for him to give his speech, which will be 10 minutes to the audience and to other panel members. Fraser, thank you very much. Are you on mute, Fraser?
I was indeed. Apologies for that. So thank you, Donovan, for what I said. And yes, I will do my best to, in 10 minutes, encapsulate what is a 3.5-year project, and indeed longer than that. And therefore, I think it's right that I take you through a little bit of the history, because it's said in some quarters, I know, that this is an ill-considered proposal. And I think it's right that all of you who are unfamiliar with this, which is slightly over half of you, and I see almost half the people here are in fact members of council or otherwise involved in the process. But for the rest of you, I can assure you that it's a very detailed and considered proposal. So the Council Membership Committee, which I chair, is one of the fixed committees of Council, and it has a specific responsibility to consider Council's representational base and to put forward proposals to reform that if it thinks that there is a need to. Since Council was last reformed in 2000, 20 years ago, 21 years ago nearly, obviously a lot has changed in our profession, dramatic change. And the CMC has over the 20 years, sorry, had various formats. It's a committee that works in 4-year cycles. So there have been 5 CMCs or 4 CMCs so far, about to be a 5th, which have looked at this issue, and all of them, except the first, have recommended reforms to council, finding the representational base lacking in one way or another. So this CMC was fairly determined that it would put proposals forward, which, if necessary, would go to our member ballot and have the endorsement of the profession. And we're very pleased that it's now in that situation, although in fact the ballot wasn't of our doing, because we have been successful in persuading council and the general meeting that the reform should be introduced, and I will be trying to persuade you too in the ballot to also support the position, which is now a relative consensus position. So far from being ill-considered, this particular CMC started debating the matter in August 2017 and has met over 20 times since then. It's reported to council on 8 different occasions, now the 8th occasion being when council voted to support the proposal that it put forward. During that process, it established a working group with council CMC itself has 3 council members in and another 14, 15 members of the profession who've contributed to the debate, and our positions have almost entirely been unanimous of the committee. There are only 2 small issues where there have been any significant differences between the 15, 16 people on that committee. We have considered a mass of data, statistics over the last 10 years, previous reviews by the CMC, community discussion papers, that's the community sections divisions. We've looked at the council election process. We looked at the balance of council, the election data. We've looked at where council members are based relative to the profession itself. And we've had massive consultation. We have consulted with all the divisions, that is Women's Law Division, Solicitors Division, and similar, and the JLD and Ethnic Minorities Division. We've consulted with most of the successions. We managed to consult directly with 13 of the local law societies, and we've attended meetings of the local law societies' national conferences. We've met all the chairs of the Law Society committees. We've met the Law Centres Network, EU Committee, Competition Session. I could go on. We've had direct correspondence with 48 council meters, 48 council members, and in all have managed to engage with something like 80% of the current constituencies, not all, but enough, we think, to have come to a conclusion that has validity in terms of what we recommend. So what we're talking about is council. Now, council, which is currently 97 members, is the voice of the profession. It deals with all representational matters, policy, public interest issues such as the rule of law, and having, in addition to dealing with all major policy, we also have oversight of all governance responsibilities. So it's an important committee. And it has, in my view, having been on it for a very long time, as Donovan mentioned, I am the longest serving council member. It is not what it should be. It is a shadow of its former self, in my view. And I've watched it, and I think, move progressively towards an unrepresented body with a great degree of sadness. And I'm highly motivated in respect of these reforms to try and get council back to being a proper representative body. And the essence of the changes, I will tell you when I've just briefly told you how council is presently set up. At the moment, we have some 97 seats, potentially 100, but there are only 97 classified at the moment. 61 of those are geographical seats representing constituencies of England and Wales. 27 of them are practice or work area seats representing the areas of practice, the main areas of practice, and 11 of them are characteristic seats representing the increasingly important parts of the characteristic makeup of our profession. Now, it is my view, and the majority view of the AGM and others who've considered this, that there are too many geographical seats, and more importantly, too many of the geographical seats are presenting identical positions. There is nothing within the geographical characteristic which enables you to separate geographical constituencies, and the potential to get a commonality of view across a fairly minor part of the profession is extremely high. In its first proposal, CMC did suggest to council that if it wanted to maintain its geographical structure, we needed to embed within that geographical structure equality, diversity, and inclusion by creating larger constituencies and defining within each constituency roles for women, roles for ethnic minorities, and others who were not adequately represented. But council rejected that. So we've gone through a series of alternatives with council, and after consultation with as many people as we could, we have come up with a proposal which involves not a major change, and not as major change as we would have liked, but a reduction in the geographical seats from 61 to 46, an increase in the practice sector seats from 27 to 33, and an increase in the characteristic seats from 11 to 18. And the principal reason for this is that we want to make council representative of today's profession and ensure that important parts of the voice of the profession that are not currently being heard are heard. We also want to do tangential things, which is to make sure that all council members are subject to open and transparent elections, which is not the case at the moment. 18 council seats are appointed by committees. Some of them are not even solicitors' organisations. We want to encourage greater collaborative engagement between council, the sections, divisions and other solicitor organisations. And we want to avoid the reputational challenge that council is not the effective, legitimate voice of the profession. We also want, as far as we can, to introduce and keep equality, diversity and inclusion on the agenda, and these proposals we're recommending will be monitored for their impact. Why are we doing this? Well, I've already pointed out council was last reformed 20 years ago, and since then council has massively changed. For example, we now have the statistics, I believe, will be coming for the EDI committee when it meets next week. We now have significant increases in the number of women and other important areas of profession, but these have not been replicated on council. And this is because the people who we want to represent, we want to be represented on council, struggle to get represented in geographical seats, which tend to take a more traditional perspective. So women solicitors represent 52% of the profession now, but there are only 39% of council. In-house solicitors, one of the fastest growing areas, are 23% of the profession, with 15% of those working in commerce, but there are only 9%. Only 3% from commerce amongst in-house solicitors. Most importantly, the new profession, the future profession, under 20 years PQE solicitors, they total 104,000 at 70% of the profession, but there are only 24% on council. Solicitors under 10 years are 57,000, 39% of the profession, but 10% of council. And the same for solicitors under 6 years, massive underrepresentation. Solicitors working in major corporate firms and in business law, 60% of the profession are barely represented on council. At best, 15% practice business law, and most of that at the small business level. So we have a profession that is simply not only not representing the current profession, but it is representing, missing and failing to represent the voice of that profession at a very critical time in its development. Some data which the EDI committee will be seeing shortly shows, interesting enough, that the only area of the profession that's significantly overrepresented in council is elderly males. No great surprise there. Now, that is what we want to change. No reference to any particular individuals. It doesn't matter to us who is elected for geographical seats. But what we do want to see is that we have more ethnic minorities, more women, more junior solicitors, if I can use that expression to encase what is, to all intents, half the profession, and corporate lawyers actually represented on this esteemed body of ourselves. We also want to make sure that we have voting for all seats. And you will know that the Law Society, as a result of our work, has been in a flurry of activity lately to try and get everyone registered. Hooray for that. And I'm sorry for the problems that you've encountered as a result of that. Although there are 32 of us today here representing all the London law societies, apart from for some reason I wasn't responsible for inviting. I don't know why North West London weren't invited. But believe it or not, the number of solicitors working in the areas that the law societies represented today actually have as a potential catchment area is 52,394. And we have just 32 of us at the meeting. And so what we're predominantly engaged here with is engagement. We want to improve the engagement between the profession and the society and the council. And we won't do that if we continue to elect geographical constituencies in the way we do. You may like to know that in the geographical constituencies, over the last 7 years, there have only been 16 contested seats out of something like 120 possible elections. And the average turnout in those contested geographical seats has been 14%, and in many a lot lower than that. Where we do get elections and interest and engagement is in the non-geographical seats. So whilst we're not attacking the geographical seats, and we hugely respect the contribution that geographical solicitors have made on council, on their geographical base, we do want to introduce fresh thinking and new ideas into the profession and make it something that today's profession can identify with and say, this is my council. Thank you.
Thank you very much Fraser. That was very well put, very forceful, and some very good points you put there with statistics. And what I would say is that in any walk of life, one always has to review and see if things should be looked on to change. I mean, one of the beauty of in the law is that when we all qualified, some earlier than others, some later than others, the law doesn't stand still. Legislation changes, the way private practice works change, and there is also a much bigger opening up of lawyers who are working in-house, which again is something that you rightly made reference to. So thank you very much for your points. To counter that, I would like to introduce you to David Taylor, who is a member of the Law Society that I am a member of, and I would like to mention that David is a past president and secretary of the South London Law Society, and he's been a council representative for South London for over 15 years, and he's retiring from his role in the 2021 Law Society AGM. But during his tenure, he has been chair of the membership board, a member of the regulatory affairs board, a trustee of the Society's pension fund. He's also been a manager of the Battersea CAB for 10 years until 1988 when he joined Hannon Co, and where he was an equity partner up until March of this year, just before COVID. So you can work that one out if you want to. And he's now a consultant and still practices as a notary. And he's worked in Battersea for 42 years, and to quote him, it's his manner. So without further ado, David, I'd like to give you the floor for you to put your pitch for the next 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Donovan, and thank you, Fraser. Overrunning as always. I just wanted to say a couple of things. That firstly, I think Fraser and I are of one mind in that we are desperate that the Law Society is an effective representative body. We are going to be faced with, in the next couple of years, I suspect, a complete separation from the SRA, and our income as a law society will not be dependent, or will not be able to depend on the practicing fee to fund the representative arm of the Law Society, and we will probably become a voluntary subscription membership body. So it is absolutely vital that we engage with the membership, and I think probably Fraser and I are completely at one on that. The problem I have with the so-called reforms is that to some extent we're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic, in that the problem we have at the moment is that we have no effective method of establishing who our membership is. And so it is all very well and good to say that you're going to increase the subject area seats or in the demographic seats, but there is no real way at the moment of establishing who would belong to those sectors, because at the moment the SRA have the information by and large, and for a long time, certainly when I was chair of membership board and we were trying to get this information from them, they refused to divulge it because for data protection issues, as they say. So however much Fraser thinks that these reforms will affect the effectiveness of the organisation, I have grave doubts that anything we do at this moment, until and if we get our databases sorted out, will be ineffective and irrelevant. I just wanted to say a few things about geographical seats. The in particular in South London, we're not that greatly affected, and I'll come back onto South London because that's my manor, as I said. But there have been significant pushback from various geographical members on council who they think are being disenfranchised by their reduction in the number of geographical seats. To me, a geographical seat can encompass all the objectives that council membership committee wants. There is nothing to stop anybody from standing for a geographical seat. And I think that over the last few years, there has been a significant upturn in people standing for those seats that have not stood previously. There has been a significant churn on council in terms of new membership. So do not run away with the idea that it's the same 100 people and have been the same 100 people for the last 10 years. That's not the case. There's been significant changes in the makeup of council. So I think there's been quite a lot of pushback, as I say, from geographical members. As I say, it doesn't affect South London particularly, except in a few cases. And those cases, I think, are indicative of one of the problems I have with these so-called reforms. For South London, we've been faced with the prospect of losing certain postal codes within the South London area. If I could just explain, South London has in the past been quite understandable. It has been the London boroughs that are contiguous with the Thames, from Greenwich to the London Borough of Wandsworth. Easily understood, everybody knows where they are, fine. But now the CMC wishes to micromanage small areas of not even postal codes. So for example, we were faced with the idea of SW15, which is Putney, from being removed and put into Surrey, God knows why. But and then we were faced with the idea of micro or salami slicing SW15 into different mini sections of that postcode to say that Roehampton would then go into Surrey. Again, all that's part of the London Borough of Wandsworth and should remain integral. We've also had the prospect of some of the SW17 being, or SW17 being removed from the constituency. And again, that seems to be ludicrous. I mean, that's tooting. In fact, our past president, who I think is on the call, is a constituent in SW17.
Certainly is.
So I've got grave difficulties with these proposals, and it's not, in my opinion, being adequately. Although Fraser gave a big spiel how they've gone through a great process of consultation. At no stage has anybody sat down sent South London a map and said, "Look, this is what we're saying." The South London has not been invited for any, I think, significant consultation with the geographical seats. As I say, there's been significant correspondence from various members, geographical members, to the CMC about the way they think that they've been left behind in these consultations. So what I'm really concerned about, though, is that the proposals change from week to week. And it seems to me, and I'm sorry to say this, but it seems that the chair of the CMC has the power by diktat to change the constituency boundaries by offering to this postcode or leave out that postcode. Now, that cannot be right. There should be a set proposals that everybody understands and should be kept to. And those are the ones that we should be voting on, not ones that change with the tide. if I could just summarize my feelings, as I say, I feel that we are wasting our time on this. We're spending an inordinate amount of time and certainly an inordinate amount of money. I think perhaps, well, the last postal ballot we had, I think cost about 70 grand. We should be directing our energies, as I say, to making this a representative body, making the Law Society a representative body and getting our data in order. And that's what we should be spending our time and effort in, and not, as I say, rearranging the deck chairs. I cannot see any reason why, with the new proposals, that there would be any more engagement by the membership. Membership organisations are bedeviled by lack of significant involvement. That's, if you ever belong to a trade union, which I know Fraser has great experience of, it is the minority of people get involved in trade union work, not the majority. And it's always the activists, the minority in membership organisations that participate. So I see, although you may change this, that and the other, at the end of the day, it requires motivation from people to actually stand for these positions. And I can't see anything that's being proposed that will increase participation by the membership. And that can only be done until and if we can say to the membership, we are an effective lobbying body, we are protecting your interests and we are putting forward your interests. That's the way we encourage membership to engage, not by rejigging the boundaries. I think I'll shut up now and let you get on with it.
Donovan.
Thank you very much, David.
Donovan, could I be given the opportunity to just fact check on the 4 points that David made, which were wrong?
Well,
I really would like to put it right now.
Fraser, can we do that at the end, after everyone's given their spiel? Because there's going to be a question and answer afterwards. Would that be in order, please?
Well, I want people to understand now that David made 4 points, all of which were not based on fact, and I can explain why. Thank you.
Well, no.
I will wait till...
let's wait until I'd rather wait until everyone has given their speech, because I think that's only fair. And then afterwards, I'll reopen for you to put what you believe is not accurately correct, and other panel members can then speak, and any other guests or members of the audience. Is that okay, please? I can't hear you.
Asked to be given the opportunity to make those points before the discussion starts. Thank you.
I didn't really hear fully what you said. Sorry.
I said, thank you, Donovan. I agree with that, but I will ask that I be given the opportunity to put those 4 facts straight before the general discussion begins.
Of course, I will make sure I will do. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, David. Very much about geography and boundary changes, sort of akin to Parliament changing seats. And again, the points you've raised are very valid, which one has to take into serious consideration when the Law Society comes to change the format, if they do decide to do that. Going forward to our next person on the panel, it's Laura Uberoy, who is quite distinguished in her background as to what she's done and what she's achieved over the past, but she's a past president of the Westminster and Holborn Law Society and a senior solicitor at Macfarlane, specialising in finance. She originally trained at Farratt & Co, and is also a council member at the Law Society, where she sits on the board and conduct committee. Prior to becoming a solicitor, Laura worked with young people in detention facilities across the UK, and separately on capital punishment cases in Texas, defending services in the USA. She's also lectured on human rights and war crimes in The Hague and taught law across the world, including Cambridge and Melbourne. Quite an exhausting whirlwind career, which sounds very exciting. And obviously your knowledge is very rounded insofar as not just qualifying as a solicitor, but matter that you've done prior to that. And clearly that will add to your ongoing career with Macfarlane's and wider with the Law Society. So on that note, Laura, could you like to put your pitch, which I know is firmly for matters to change? Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks so much, Donovan. You've sort of set me up for a bit of a fall there with that intro, but I'm grateful to you for indulging Fraser for his right to reply when we finish, so I won't touch on that. Maybe the one thing I would just say, following up from David as I'm speaking, is that there was mention of the postal ballot vote and how much that actually costs, and I think it is important for all members to note that the proposals that both Fraser has put forward and that I'm putting forward were approved at the annual general meeting, and because that is representative of all members, they would have then been passed. And it is the minority of 20 members, I believe including David, that called for a postal ballot, an all members ballot. That means that the cost of a postal of a ballot is being incurred. So I just wanted to make it clear that neither myself nor Fraser were advocating incurring any costs on behalf of the society, and had already taken it to the membership on that basis. But I am also grateful to David for making a perfect segue into what I wanted to speak about, because he finished his speech on talking about increasing participation, and that is exactly what the proposal that I'm putting forward with various other council members and not is. And so the proposal, in addition to Fraser's reforms, is to impose a 12-year term limit on council member seats. So at the moment, all council members are elected every 4 years, so you have a term of 4 years, and you can be re-elected in perpetuity. So you can go for as long as you stand down, or if you aren't successful in an election. And taking a step back and looking at trying to make sure that the Law Society is effective, which is, as everyone said, what we want to achieve. And one of the things that is clearly missing in terms of good governance is a term on how long people can sit as council members. And I'm not going to bore you with good governance codes and the like, but I'm hoping that maybe just 4 simple reasons might help to explain why we've got to where we are. So the first one is just as a matter of good governance. The second is that term limits will help us improve diversity. The third is that this just follows precedents from various membership organisations and professional bodies across legal and other professions, and recommended by groups tasked with the precise job of scrutinising the governance of council. So if I may, and if you'll indulge me for just a few minutes to go through each one of those, starting with good governance. The UK Corporate Governance Code recommends that you have term limits. If people argue that the Law Society isn't a corporate, then the Charity Governance Code for trustees recommends that you have term limits. And for the sake of optimum performance, when you're looking at the governance of a steering body like the council, in order to drive contributions from day one to ensure that you're getting optimum innovation, then you really do need these term limits. And if, moving on to the other point, you are following the precedents set by other professions and other membership organisations, then 12 years actually is still on the very generous side. Most other bodies look for somewhere between 6 to 8 years. So legal executives, arbitrators, the general medical, corporate treasurers, all entities, and just a handful out of all of the institutes and associations that I could mention, all of them have much shorter term limits for the simple reason of it's just good governance. It means that we get fresh ideas all the time. There is an overlap in elections so that you don't have a wholesale loss of your experience and a wholesale new come in. And it just means that people get stuck in a bit earlier and a bit quicker. If you are looking from a diversity perspective, which, as everyone has already mentioned, is a key focus for us at the moment, having a term limit only encourages larger numbers of people to stand in elections. I know David briefly touched on the numbers of people that are standing in elections increasingly, and that is because more senior members who might be seen as long-standing are stepping down from those seats, and finally people feel like they are then able to put themselves forward. And particularly sitting on conduct committee, and from my experience in previous elections, I know that there are significant numbers of people who want to stand in the elections and don't put themselves forward because there is an incumbent sitting. And the only way to make sure that we encourage more people to stand is to make sure that there is a free open space and people don't sit for too long. And that is not to downplay the enormous contributions that people make when they're on council for over 12 years. It's just to say that in the interest of fairness and to represent the profession, we need to keep those bodies turning. And that means that we can level the playing field, so that those who wouldn't usually be able to stand or would be put off from standing are not put off by incumbents that can dominate. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're not taking that as an attack on the people who are sitting in their existing seats who are doing a fantastic job. It's just very important to note that there is a large group of people who are put off because of that. And so that's why the term limits across all professions and across all organisations implement these as well. There are two exceptions that we've proposed. The first one is that an outgoing office holder, so the president, will still be able to sit on council for a year afterwards, because obviously it would be fairly unfortunate and not wise to have a president stop their presidential year and then just disappear from council. And similarly, anyone who is sitting on council already who has exceeded their 12-year term will be able to see out the rest of their term before the next election, when they will stand down and their seat will become vacant again. And just to go on my last point, because I'm very conscious I want to keep within time and open up to debate. As Fraser had mentioned before, there has been an incredible amount of scrutiny applied to this by the council membership committee, who, whilst led by Fraser and has council members on it, has a very broad independent base of non-council members as well to look at this. And they recommended that there should be term limits. Similarly, it went to the AGM, and the majority of members at the AGM all voted to have these term limits. And I think that it was important to take that vote to the AGM, because even me personally, as a council member, I feel conflicted in voting for something that I have an interest in. You know, I am a council member. I would love to spend the rest of my days sitting on council, but I'm also conscious that there are lots of people who would also like to take my role. And I think it is telling when Fraser mentioned that the number of seats in terms of turnover are those that are not the geographical seats. And that's because the demographic seats, if we can call them that, the ones that represent characteristics, have fewer incumbents on them tied to a particular seat, so that they stand down more frequently and have new people step in, whereas it tends to be the geographical seats that tend to have people sitting on them for longer. And my hope is that, as with local law societies, I saw this very much at Westminster and Holborn, and I'm sure you see this at South London as well. In order to keep the turnaround and the input from people, you need to find ways to encourage more people, and the term limits should definitely do that. So that is my plea, and as I'm sure all the other panel speakers are, I'm more than happy to take any questions or address any other thoughts that you might all have.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was very well put, and some very some valid points again. What stands out for me was the good governance of the term limit, which is something I know is a very strong point that you've raised in the past, and it does have merit. Again, we will see how matters progress when the vote is taken on the 15th of November. With that, I would like to introduce the final panel member, a very good friend of mine, Sarah Chandler, who, again, very exhaustive list of things, housing law solicitor, landlord and tenant. She's past president of the City of Westminster and Holborn Law Society, and also South London Law Society, a member of the Law Society Human Rights Committee, and past president of the Federation of European Bars Association. For the past 15 years, she has worked at the South Bank University as a visiting professor. She's also a champion of pro bono work and a founding member of a Colombo Caravana, on international law for lawyers in over 18 jurisdictions. She has trained lawyers extensively all over the world: Antigua, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Nigeria. And in February 2016, she was made an honorary Queen's Counsel. So without further ado, Sarah, I would like to extend the floor to you for the next 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Donovan, and thank you, fellow panel members, for putting the case so eloquently. I am in agreement with all our efforts to bring change in the Law Society so that as a representative body, we are more diverse than we've been in the past. But I do not agree with Laura that limiting council members' term to 12 years of service will do that. My decision to oppose the 12-year rule is based on the need to respect the diversity of experience on council and to value the contribution of members who, for the most part, serve in a variety of roles in committees over the years. I do believe we need diversity of representation and delivery of innovation, as Laura argues. However, I believe we need a balance between the freshness and innovation that new members bring, together with the understanding, knowledge and experience of those who've given long service. I agree with Laura that we should embody good governance practices. However, the examples given of non-executive directors on boards does not fit the representative model we have in the Law Society. Our council members represent constituents in geographical, work practice, or division of members with protected characteristics. This means that they are accountable to their constituents and are challenged every 4 years. If they do not represent the views of their constituents, then they will not be supported when they come up for election. I'm a strong supporter of local law societies as they offer a network of other solicitors, trainee solicitors, paralegals and law students. They offer the activities which bring us together in an increasingly difficult time for the profession. And they are the grassroots and strength of our profession. And I believe that equality, diversity and inclusion starts with our grassroots, and building a strong democratic tradition in local law societies is the foundation of the diversity in the Law Society. It's been argued that members may not be willing to stand against a long-serving incumbent member. However, I feel that detracts from the vision of vigorous new candidates for council elections. Being daunted is not a good position. I think that future council members should be welcomed and encouraged. If a potential candidate is serious about their commitment, then of course they should not be daunted. If a long-serving member is doing a good job and has the confidence of their constituents, then it is to the benefit of the greater good of their members and the profession that they continue to contribute, rather than to create vacancies by limiting the term that members can serve. Our strength, we are able to achieve diversity in our representation, with council reaching out to every part of the country and every part of the profession. And thanks to the strength of the diverse membership, we have had many parliamentary campaigns over the years in which members from all over have participated. And in South London, we've participated in that way, contacting our MPs, working with the public affairs team of the Law Society, and discussing consultation papers for the SRA, the government, and very occasionally other bodies. So it takes some time to get to know how the Law Society works, and this is inevitable with such a large body and hundreds of staff members serving the profession. There are a large number of roles on committees which council members fulfil. For example, council members serve on 2 boards, 6 committees of council, with a total of 48 council member seats. These are roles restricted to council members only. Then there are another 47 council members on the 25 Policy and Regulatory Affairs Committee of the Law Society. You can see where I'm going with this. I make the point because council members do more than represent their members on council. They provide members of the profession who are appointed to committees to share their expertise, and they contribute their expertise to the policy making of the Law Society. Huge amount of work to be done, and this needs a huge amount of input from council members. Robert, as you know, Robert Hush, our president, was chair of Family Law Committee for a number of years. You've heard the background of David and Fraser and Laura in their work for the Law Society. Serving on committees gives members extraordinary experience, which should not be lost to the Law Society Council, as the accumulated contribution and energy is something we value highly. Fraser, David and I are in the group of council members who have completed 12 years, and so I am the only one of the three of us who does declare an interest, because I would like to stand again, because I wish to continue to serve as a council member and to fulfil my term as chair of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, an office which is elected by council members, accountable to council, and reports to council at every meeting. In other words, it's a role that can only be taken on by a council member. And I say this because it's been suggested that an exception could be made, not within the bylaws, but in the rules for committee chairs, to make it a non-council member chair, and I don't think that's acceptable at all. I'm opposing, in principle, the 12-year rule. We've had an argument that council members fall into the same category as trustees of charities, but this is not an entirely accurate description. We're representatives, not board members, and our role is very different to that of, for example, trustees of the Law Society charity. I should know because I am one of the Law Society charity trustees. As Fraser said, we have a council of 97 members, and of them 21 have served 12 years. And of those, 7 are President David Green or past presidents. That represents a good deal of corporate memory and valuable contacts throughout the profession and outside in the wider society. It's just over a fifth of council, and I believe it's not such a big barrier to fresh approaches and innovation, or to new candidates standing for election to council. The central basis for all sound decision-making includes reference to corporate memory, providing a chain of consistent and logical decision-making in a rapidly changing world, and I hope you agree with me that the challenges of today should be informed by what we know works well, what mistakes of the past we should avoid. When we desire to make change, we need to know what the policy practice and has been as experienced by the longer serving members. It's argued that having a 12-year term will drive the development of new leaders who will stand for office earlier in their council careers and who will expedite their performance. I believe that what we will lose is the experience of members who've developed their professional careers and have contributed their understanding in their fields over years. There are also members who often have more time available because they hold senior positions in their organisations and have the space in busy timetables to contribute to the Law Society. We're striving for greater diversity in the profession, and I'm sure that we need diversity of experience, and that includes older members of the profession. Serving 12 years on council may be the province of older members, and there should not be any element of discrimination, however indirect, on grounds of age. The proposed amendment curtails a fundamental ideal that an electorate can choose to elect a qualified and willing candidate, provided all parties agree. There's no logic to the concept of limitation of term being a positive embodiment of democracy, or that changing council members at a cut-off point will benefit the work of council, committees, or the Law Society as a representative body. Constituents should be able to choose their representatives without their options being curtailed. I conclude by commending to you the values that many cultures hold high, which are experience, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom of seniors and elders. I hope that you share those values with me and that we can achieve a balance by mixing the experience of long-serving members with the freshness brought by new members. Please give what I have said some thought. When it comes to the ballot, please vote against the 12-year rule. Thank you for giving me your attention.
Have we lost Donovan? Donovan, are you there? Okay, so I think Donovan's connection might have dropped out at this moment. So I'm going to invite any of our guests to ask a question, and I'd ask that you use the electronic hand in the first instance just to let us know that you want to ask a question. Can I ask for anybody to do that now? Fraser, yes, you're quite right. I think you wanted to come back on 4 points. Can I hand over to you, Fraser?
Thank you. I was just reminding you politely. So I just wanted to take up 4 of the points that David made. And the first about not being able to hold elections. Currently, we hold databases which enable us to hold elections for over 80% of the seats on council. And I don't know quite why David thinks we can't hold elections. They might not be perfect elections, but they're as good as the elections that we can presently hold. And in fact, massive work is presently being done to rebuild the database, as he knows. And it will be ready for the ballot in a couple of weeks' time. And it is also being subdivided. So, for example, today we were able for the first time to send out an email to 15,100 members of the in-house colleagues who we previously didn't have a database for. So that is simply not correct, that we cannot hold elections under the new proposals. David also said that there was pushback from the geographical seats. Well, there is from some geographical seats, but it is a fact that of the 41 geographical constituencies, only 11, that's less 25%, voted against, wholly against these proposals when they came to council. In respect of postcodes, I was given authority by council after the decision in September to go to each council member in a geographical constituency and get the postcode sorted out. I managed to reach agreement with every council member except 2. And it is only two council seats which are currently disputing the postcode, and in both cases attributable to the fact that another local council moved in and grabbed the seats before the others responded. Now, the fact is that SW 17, 15, 16 are not in South London constituency. They are split between South London constituency and Surrey, and the current divisions have been improved by CMC, so we don't have the ridiculous situation we have at the moment, which include in one case a London constituency where the barrier is a line drawn between Queensway Underground Station and St Giles Circus, and another in Kent where it is defined by having certain parish councils in a former borough included and certain poor parishes in another constituency excluded. I mean, this kind of joke is unbelievable for a modern professional representative body. So we've moved to postcodes, whole postcodes, and I continue to try to sort out the problems I have in those two areas where one local law society grabbed the postcodes because the others didn't reply. And I hope that yet we can sort these postcodes out. It's not my decision, by the way. My decision is to reach a consensus. It's council and the CMC that decide where postcodes are. And finally, in respect of the point that Sarah just made, I think it is to be said that when we took the vote on this in council, the majority of past office holders, including presents, supported the 12-year rule, as did the majority of persons who had been sitting on council more than 12 years. So it's not true that everyone who has this wonderful wisdom thinks it's worth preserving. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I can see a hand from Melinda, and then I'll take a question from Melinda.
Thank you, Robert. Hope you can hear me. I thought I'd take the opportunity to support Laura as I'm here. Both Laura and I joined council as council members at the same time, which is just over 3 years ago. But I'm a work sector seat, I'm the private client sector seat, and I'm very pleased at Fraser's proposals to increase the number of work sector seats. But the reality is that I would not have stood for council had the then council member not stood down, and she'd been in situ for 16 years. And she, as Sarah is, and the other long-standing council members, a fantastic council member. It's absolutely not about that. And if anything, was that I and the other candidates, because I was in a contested election, were in awe of her. And frankly, it was a mystery and something that we thought none of us would ever have the opportunity to do. So that is my personal experience, and that is why I'm so much in favour of encouraging new people to stand for council, and then placing ourselves, as I will do when I'm no longer a council member, which is a role I enormously enjoy and would do for many, many years if I could, but to have the opportunity to mentor more people, to encourage people to stand and to pass that experience on, and then to continue in some of the many other roles that exist in the Law Society is, to my mind, the way to go. And I'm by no means a youngster. I'm at the tail end of my career, and yet this is my chance at council. I think as well it's important that to know that in 3 years Laura has become a board member. I'm on MCC, which is one of the 2 committees that sit just below the board, so it is quite possible to learn quickly with the support of other council members. And I think I've shared that because I think that's the reality of council. It's a mystery to our members, and I don't think it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. I think perhaps before I take the question from Ilse, does anybody else want to say anything else about feeling that perhaps it wasn't that a vacancy to stand against a representative just wasn't an easy option, and that this rule will bring about more participation? Does anybody want to follow on from that point? In which
Robert,
case then,
if I may quickly,
yeah, Laura.
and then I need to send my apologies. I'm so sorry. I need to then dash off because I'm on baby duty this evening. But speaking from personal experience, I sit in a personal characteristic seat. I represent junior lawyers, and I waited for that seat to come up for election because the incumbent has a cut-off time for me to stand in, because the alternative would be for me to have put in an election statement to run either against Fraser or to run against Geoffrey Forrest, who are both incredible council members of long standing. But I think everybody can appreciate why I probably wasn't going to do that. And as it turned out, running for the junior lawyers seat was much more contested. I ran against 15 other people in that election, and that was more palatable than running against one Fraser and one Geoffrey for obvious reasons. So that's just my little, as you asked for personal stories. But just I wanted to say thank you so much for the platform, and I'm so sorry that I can't stay for questions, but equally very happy to take anything by email or telephone call if anyone has anything that they want to directly chat to me about afterwards.
Thank you very much, Laura. Good luck with the children this evening.
Robert, could I just make an additional point to follow up on that? At the moment, what part of our problem is that because we've not had a proper database, which we now do have, we've not been able to tell people that elections were going on. You only found out that an election was going on if you happened to read the Law Society's Gazette right page on the right day, or if you happened to see the notice of the AGM posted on the Law Society's website, and or you were an active member of a local law society and someone told you that an election was going on. The vast majority of the profession never knew that elections were being carried out, and that will change as a result of these proposals now being considered.
Thank you, Fraser. I'm going to take a question now from Ilse.
Thank you, Robert. This question is for Fraser. Fraser, in which practical ways would the new proposals increase engagement?
I'm sorry, Elisa, I missed that. In what way will the new proposals increase engagement?
Yes, in which practical ways would the new proposals increase engagement?
I understood. So what we did in CMC, and it was in an earlier, sorry, my voice giving out too, it was in an earlier version of our proposals, not in the material you're about to get in the ballot, because it's a small point. So we have identified every geographical seat, every work practice seat, every work sector seat, and every characteristic seat with a division, section, committee, area, local law society. And so every seat now has a part of the Law Society machine that it can identify with. And more importantly, we introduced 6 months ago now a new document setting out council members' responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, which were really targeted at making council more accountable to constituents. And those now mandate council members to engage with those organisations and with their constituencies, which they didn't previously do. And unfortunately, some, not David, I would say, or any of the other council members here present, but some wholly failed to engage with their constituents. My co-council member in Holborn, for the last 4 years, I don't think ever came to a committee meeting, and that happens, I'm afraid, and that hopefully will end. I hope that helps, Ilse.
Ashmeet, can I come to you with your question, please?
Yeah, thank you. I have more of a statement as well as a question, and the question actually was for Laura, but unfortunately she's left. My main point was it's funny to kind of see that we're now discussing postcodes in an era where everyone's joining in by video calls and doesn't matter where you're geographically based. The whole point comes down to, from both sides, is that we need more engagement. We need more engagement from younger solicitors, from ethnic minority solicitors, from female solicitors. And it's the focus that should be on engagement rather than all the restrictions that you're putting in place. Fraser, you mentioned that there is 53,000 solicitors just in the areas that are currently on the call today, or should be on the call today. If you look at 100 representatives of the profession, that's nothing. And to reduce those seats further means that you're actually reducing the chance of people from those minority backgrounds or from those areas that you want to get engagement from not being able to actually engage. So increasing the areas that are covered and reducing the number of seats that are available just does the opposite to me than what you want to achieve, which is to have more engagement. And the other point of having people serve potentially for 12-year or maximum term does actually make that, if there is a seat where people don't want to stand and you have someone that's coming up to the 12 years and can no longer stand, you're going to run into positions where there will be no representative. And the point is that it is always, and it will always be, the minority that want to engage with this process. I am an ethnic minority. I work for a private law firm and have worked in-house before. I'm going back into in-house. I've been part of the Junior Lawyers Committee for the last 5 years, and I have tried to get engagement in from my friends who work in-house, who work with banks, who work in corporate law, and across the sector. And to be honest, majority of them are just not interested in being part of something like this, either because they have other things going on in their lives, they're too busy with work, or there's just no interest. So if the idea is that you want more people to be engaged in the process, or you want more people to be involved, one, you can't actually rule out the people that want to do the job, no matter their age, no matter how long they've served for you. And two, you need to actually get out there and get people talking. And by reducing the sectors and by reducing the number of seats on the board, actually what you're doing is minimizing the impact that individuals that want to do this, that want to actually be part of this, can have on the outer society. So the question of what will the rule be if the 12-year limitation comes into place? What will the rule be for any seat that cannot be filled because there is no one that wants to run? Would you allow someone to go past the 12-year time limit, and would that person then be allowed to stay as long as they want, or what was the position there? And two, what actually is the proposal going to do for engagement from all the groups that you want to get more engagement from?
Can I answer the first part of that? I don't know if Melinda wants to deal with the second part. So the first part on engagement, we're not reducing the number of seats on council. We're redistributing. Council is currently 97, and it's staying at 97. We haven't reduced the geographical footprint at all. Every area that was previously represented is still represented. We haven't reduced the number of characteristic seats. We've increased the characteristic seats for every area where we had data which justified it. That didn't include LGBT, it didn't include disability, but we have today, I've seen for the first time, new data on disability, which I know will now go to CMC to look at that, because it does show that disability solicitors are underrepresented on council, but that we've only had that data. So the object of engagement is actually, the object is engagement, because we don't have it at the moment because there are too many areas that aren't sufficiently represented for the representative to be able to engage effectively with the huge numbers that we have. So, for example, we've reduced the geographical seats by merging the 2 Kent seats, by merging the 2 Suffolk seats, by merging 2 seats in Birmingham. They didn't want a second seat. And so everywhere that we've removed a seat, there is a new constituency in its place and a law society which represents that constituency. So there is no disengagement whatsoever from these proposals in respect to the representational base. It's just it's a reappraisal and a reevaluation focused solely on providing seats for those who are not presently represented on council. Thank you.
I think Melinda was going to pick up on the second point.
Thank you. Yes, I'll come back on the second point. I think that if I may explain regarding the engagement of the membership, I think engaging our wider membership, the thousands and thousands of solicitors on the roll, is of course something that this seeks to address and seeks to make the Law Society a body that people more want to be part of and engaged with. But in terms of those who already take up positions, responsibility in the governance and in the organisation, there are a number of committees in addition to council. I, for example, sit on a policy committee, the Wills and Equity Policy Committee, and on a community, the Private Client Section Committee. And there are many, many people who apply to those committees and are involved in them, so many so that there are not enough places for them. We're only talking here about council seats, and my view is that all those other people who are on those other committees may seek to get more involved with council if it were more something they felt they could do. On the 2 committees that I'm in that have nothing to do with council, the policy committee and the community committee, I have, in my role as their council member, explained to them what a council member does and how they could stand for council if they chose to. And without exception, all of them did not know. Not one of them has been a council member or applied. So I think that I don't think we will have the vacancies once we make it much more open and available and less of a mystery to people. That's my personal view.
But so I sit, thank you for both of you for the answer, and I do appreciate the response that you've given. I myself sit on the Intellectual Property Law Committee, and as you say, you've explained the role of the council members to your committees, and there's been not any kind of response back off that they knew about this. So, and the fact that Fraser mentioned that it's only recently that you've been able to actually email the membership at large to be able to say this is what's happening. I was at the meeting that happened in September, and it was only a day before the meeting that actually these proposals were shared. And on the day of the meeting, someone actually emailed in to say it might be wise to actually share the proposal wording so that members could read. So clearly there's more work to be done on the engagement part of actually getting the information out there for people to understand what's happening before you start changing what the current structure is. You need to be able to be fully aware that actually all the relevant information is getting to the members. Members are fully aware of what the changes are, what the proposals are, what committee members do, what the council does, so that they know what engagement they can get involved in before you come back with a resolution of actually it's not working and not enough members are participating, or we're not getting the level of engagement and this is the way to address it. Because clearly we've not been able to actually address everyone equally. We've not been able to get the information out. If the only way you've got the information out was by way of a publication, and if only by way of looking at the publication people were aware of elections. Clearly that's not right, not in this day and age. That can't be right, and you can't conclude that you've done research that shows that engagement will improve by these proposals where actually you're not even communicating to the whole membership. So it's just baffling to see that we're actually appearing to go in the opposite direction. I very much appreciate that we're actually bringing in seats for the parties that aren't represented, like disabled, LGBT. And I have seen the work that the Law Society has done in respect of LGBT, because a number of solicitors from my firm have been involved with that work and have been to meetings. But again, the response from them from those meetings has been that there has been a meeting and then there's been a massive gap of no further engagement. And that's the point that annoys me. You can't have a meeting and say we've engaged with people with no further follow-ups. So clearly,
Ashmead, this is just plain wrong. These proposals, including the 12-year proposals, have been massively circulated within the profession. I myself have personally attended meetings of the chairs of the Law Society's standing committees on black letter law issues, including the Intellectual Property Committee, when they've been told about these proposals and engaged with them. Every local law society should have been told about them by their council members. Every section or division has known about them. I mean, we in the CMC, we have had 3 years of consultation. I've gone on local law society sites and seen my papers published and discussed by local law society council members. I don't know what else you can possibly do apart from use the current mechanisms that exist for communicating with members to tell them about it, and that happened to a very wide extent.
Can I just move to Susan now, who's been waiting patiently for some time? Susan, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I've sort of got two questions. I suppose one is to both sides of the argument about how do you think that your proposal, as opposed to the alternative proposal, will have an impact on increasing diversity and widening participation? And then I suppose linking to the last point, to what extent, I mean, it seems to me that the barrier to participation is, if you're a young lawyer, you know, you're working your socks off every night and you don't have time to go to a council meeting. The structure of council meetings is quite, you know, old-fashioned and off-putting to lots of people. And, you know, if you're in the city, you've got to, you know, do 10 chargeable hours a day and you don't have time to go to the toilet, let alone go to a council meeting. So I just wonder if at the same time, those kind of issues which are a deterrent to those kind of groups that are missing from council to engage are being addressed, or if there's anything within the current proposals that can help with those kind of things. I don't know, things like job sharing positions or or different ways of doing things. Thank you.
And can I just add to Susan's point? Let's just think about this on the question of participation and how does the Law Society reach out to more members. We have 30 people in this meeting this evening, and I wonder how many of us would be here if you had to come and meet with me at the Elephant and Castle this evening.
Sorry, you just reminded me of one more point.
Surely that's an important question for any future development of any membership organisation at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say, I mean, it's a bit of you know, like a circular argument, isn't it? The problem is there are not very many people involved in local societies, so they're not very representative, and you know, the committees are not necessarily particularly representative. So really, to get the views of members, we'd need to be able to email everybody. I don't know if that's within our capability, but one would need that kind of a consultation to have any kind of fair consultation. I think most of the lawyers in my firm probably don't even know that the South London Law Society exists, although we are a mile from Elephant and Castle. So yeah, I just think there are other ways in which we could consult.
Fraser, would you like to come back on that point?
Sure, I would. I mean, just take up. I would, thank you. And it's a very important point, Sue. Thank you. Both of the points. I mean, first of all, the experience outside London is different from the experience inside London. In London, the City Law Society is fairly active, Holborn's fairly active, one or two of the others are a bit. But outside London, particularly in the urban areas, the law societies are extremely active and effective, certainly in the major urban conurbations. and that's true of some regional law societies. And many of the law societies outside London have regional networks. And they meet together. So there is massive disinformation. The London experience is very atypical. In fact, the CMC's proposals did include at one point that we should establish regional councils, and that those regional councils should be virtual councils, and that they should feed into council. And we had a proposal that every member would be able to dial in effectively to a meeting like the one we're having today to discuss policy with their individual council members. Unfortunately, council rejected that proposal, but I have no doubt at all that CMC will be returning to that. And to take up your second point in that, I utterly agree with the point that was being made by Ashmead before, and you've made it again, and Robert has hinted at it, that we need to look at more effective communication. And to be honest, the COVID, it was and the consequences of that in terms of virtual meetings has been an absolute a beautiful present to the CMC and its proposals, because we 100% behind extending the way the whole thing works by encouraging virtual meetings. And our local law society, Holborn and Westminster, that Laura and I are both involved in, we have all our meetings virtually now, and the increase in attendance has been 150%. Compared with what we normally get at a law society meeting. And this must be one of the ways forward, and it will be for others, because I too am retiring from council next year. It will be for others to take this forward, but it's down to us all to make the law society more effective by being more engaged. I mean, you're absolutely right, Ashmead, and the point that you've just made, Susan. There are lots of people who will never be engaged. And if we get 10%, that would be fabulous. And it would be good, frankly, for a membership organisation to have that kind of active engagement. But what we've got to do is try, because our respectability as a voice in the external world is governed very much by how the external world sees us as being representative or otherwise. So we have to be representative, and that's what these reforms are about.
David, can I bring you in now?
Thank you, Robert. I didn't want to dominate the discussion. I don't, as a senior member of council, I thought we should remain in the back seat, but obviously some of us didn't think that. Anyway, a couple of points I wanted to make. First of all, just a quick one. I lived in SW17 for 20 years, so if Fraser wants to point out any bit of SW17 that's in Surrey, I'd be grateful for him to tell me. The second bit is that as a cynical old lawyer, as a cynical person, I'm part of the awkward squad on council. I fully admit, and I like to hold people to account for things. I like to hold the management of the Law Society to account, and I certainly like to hold the SRA to account. Now, the problem I think you have with the term limit in particular is that, yes, all very well and good to get junior lawyers involved. As somebody's already said, I think they have other fish to fry. You're making a career for yourself, and perhaps council is not something that you would necessarily want to get involved unless you thought it was something to put on your CV, which again, I don't think is a very good motivation to join council. But junior lawyers may feel more intimidated by arguing with the authority figures that you have in council, not only the management, but also, as I say, SRA. And once we become, I think it's inevitable, once we become a membership-only organisation, it's even more reason that you need militant members of the profession to argue with the SRA about what they're doing, which to my extent, is destroying the profession. But that's another argument. So I just want to say that I think the term limits will prohibit certain people who could, I think, be effective in holding the SRA's feet to the fire from remaining involved in the Law Society business. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Fraser, can I just ask you, we've been talking this evening about diversity and representation. Can I just ask you about the postcodes in SE1 in South London, just by London Bridge and Waterloo, because that's an area that has caused some concern for South London Law Society Committee. And the problem is that proposal would take away areas of South London which are next to the River Thames. So for people who aren't familiar with the area, it's that area sort of from Waterloo going east towards London Bridge and including London Bridge. And the difficulty that causes for South London Law Society is that it takes away one of the major supporters of the local law society, which is Anthony Gold solicitors. They would find themselves part of the central London constituency rather than South London. And I understand that the local law society operates separately from council constituencies, but my worry is that over years, solicitors at that firm might feel more facing towards central London than South London. We might lose a significant supporter. A lot of our committee members have come from Anthony Gold solicitors, and they support the work of the committee. Why is it that it's necessary to take those areas out of South London and push them into central London, when at the same time these proposals would create new seats for those city commercial firms on council?
First of all, let me just deal also with David's last point. The current constituency boundaries of Surrey include SW17 part. They also include SW15 part, and they also include SW16 part. And that's not my creation. That was a creation of 20 years ago. And my job has been to try and sort this out. So too with SE1. Now, let me explain the situation with SE1. This proposal was introduced into CMC's proposal to council a year ago, over a year ago, and were discussed initially at council in December. And no objection was raised by anyone in South London Law Society until relatively recently. The reason it was proposed to move into SE1 is quite simple. In London, in the centre of London, there is a proliferation of constituency seats. Westminster has 3 seats, Holborn has 2 seats, West London has 2 seats, the City of London has 5 seats. Now, there's a huge concentration of solicitors in those areas, but the number of council members needed to be reduced, and we were all pretty ad idem in the approach that's been taken. South London, not so. But we managed to create a central London constituency by discussion with all the local law societies. The city, therefore, going forward, will no longer exist as a constituency. The City Law Society's boundary is currently defined, as everyone else's is, by reference to postcodes or parts of postcodes, but it also includes a number of designated firms who are city firms in the traditional sense, and who are not, for voting purposes or any other electoral purposes, based anywhere other than in the city, i.e. they get to vote in city election, irrespective of where their postcodes are. And some of those firms are in E14, Canary Wharf, and some of those firms are in Bankside SE1. And so those firms that are in Bankside and are in the city are not in SE1. Now, when we looked at the proposal, it seemed to us that the way to flush this issue out was to move SE1 into the central London constituency. And we looked at the numbers and saw that the numbers in these firms, I think there are 800 solicitors in Norton Rose alone. And you see 2 or 3 other firms and you've got it over 1,000. Is that a big slug of those firms would actually be wanting to vote in the city constituency still? And therefore we put in SE1 into the central London seat. Now, as Robert knows, and as David knows, and as everyone in South London who's active knows, for the last 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, we've been trying to sort out the consequences of that decision. Because nobody wants to harm South London Law Society. Everybody wants to make sure that we are preserving Norton Rose's solicitors' right to stand and vote in the city, as we are Anthony Gold's solicitors' right to stand and vote in South London, and to support the local law society. Although you can be a member of many law societies and contribute to as many local law societies as you wish. But I understand that financially firms may not do that. So this is a problem that has got to be resolved, and we've got to find a solution for it. It's a great pity that it wasn't raised by South London earlier. Maybe it wasn't seen as important. Maybe they didn't think the motions would go through. That's probably what happened, but they did go through. And they've gone through with SE1 in central London constituency. And we will obviously have to change that. There is power under the bylaws to do that. And we need to sit down with the two constituents. The other one is Essex and Suffolk, where there's a disagreement about whether Colchester is in Essex or Suffolk. It's a pretty clear one to me, but there we are. Other people think differently. 100 years ago, it was in Essex, apparently, and or something like the Knights of the Round Table have got something to do with it, apparently. Anyway, but we will get these problems sorted out. They are minutiae in the scale of the thing, and we will find a solution. We have the power under the rule to find a solution, and we will have to find a solution in SE1. But it can't be one that takes Norton Rose out of the city where they presently are. And the way I proposed to do that was to take the three parts of SE1, Bankside, SE2, SE9, and SE8 out. And that was what I think someone called dicing or slicing, but it's the only way we can do it. And we may have to do it in SW15, 16 and 17 too, because Surrey think SW15, 16 and 17 should be theirs and part of Surrey Law Society. And we must find a consensus here, and that's what we will work towards. But that should not put you off voting for these reforms. If you believe in reform, if you're a progressive solicitor, if I can put it that way, then you should support these forms and know that the postcode issues will be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, but perhaps you or Melinda could just explain for the people that are here this evening, why, if city firms are going to have increased representation on council with specialist seats, why is it necessary to take why is it necessary to deal with it on postcodes in South London? I'm not too sure.
They're not the city. There are no longer going to be city seats. So the firms in EC1, EC2, EC3, and 4 will be voting in. But
I thought you said at the beginning
in
there were going
central
to be
London
seats created for minority interest groups and also city interests as well. Did I misunderstand that?
I think you misunderstood. So there are going to be seats for major corporate firms, but not all city firms are major corporate.
Not Norton Rose.
Norton Rose probably are one of the major corporates, I would think.
Fraser, I think, are you talking, Robert, about the work type, the corporate type, the business seats, as opposed to where they're situated? I think that's...
Yes, I'm sorry. So from now on, there will be no city. There is no city constituency. They will be in central London, along with people like Michael, Nathan, whose head I can just see, and myself and Laura. They will just be a single seat covering most of London W, all of London EC, all of London WC, and lots of London and bit here and there. So it's a big constituency with 5 seats, and there will be no city seat. So those firms will vote geographically alongside all the other firms in central London. But there will, in the practice sector, be a new 4 seats for major corporate law firms. Not least, they pay for most of the law society, and the top 80 firms actually employ over 50% of the profession, believe it or not. And so they need a role and function and contribution, and that is why they will have major corporate seats. But they're not, for them, They're not for the firms. None of the seats are for firms. None of the seats are for local law society. All of the seats are for solicitors working in major corporate firms.
Melinda, does that cover the point you wanted to make, or is there something else you'd like to add?
I just wanted to make a small point in respect of something that Susan said earlier about the difficulties in people attending council meetings due to the pressures of their job, etc., which I think is such an important point. And what I wanted to say was, it is exactly true that it is a problem. One of the very few good things that's come out of COVID, as we've just said, is the fact that you can have meetings like this. And what was so evident was at the council meeting, in fact, when Fraser's reforms were approved by council and voted by council, it was at the end of the council meeting, and there was something like 90% of council members still on the meeting, which I have never seen happen at the end of a council meeting. And it just shows that that was possible because of that, because of this platform. And I think that the way that council can become more accessible and possible for participants from all walks of life, at different stages of their careers, you can change that from within. Because when you're there, if you're saying, I can't come to council meetings in this way, a group of us can't because we're parents or because we have city jobs or because of whatever, then you will be able to change that. Whereas if it is people who have more availability, then of course it's a comfortable place to be in that will remain.
Can I just add, we did propose to have council meetings at weekend, and that was rejected. We also proposed to have them later in the evenings, and that was rejected. What we have proposed is there should be creches available, and that hasn't been objected to so far, and hopefully will happen.
Okay, it's moving on. We've just gone past 7:30. I'm going to go to Michael now, and then I think I don't see any more new hands, but Michael might be our last comment or question. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, just really a quick question for Fraser. I need your help because as a member and former president of West London Law Society, the fact that is staring me in the face is that the West London Law Society constituency will now be spread over, I think, 3 different council seat areas: London Central, North East London and North West London. How do I explain to the members of West London Law Society that they're going to have to be dealing with 7 different council members, depending upon where they are?
Well, there never was a West London Law Society seat. This is an illusion. The seat belonged to the members who are in the postcode. So there will, whether West London Law Society wishes to have all of the members attending it. In Holborn and Westminster Law Society currently have 5 council members, and we take it in turns to turn up at the Law Society meetings and give a report. And we meet pretty much monthly, and one of us gives a report each month. That's how we do it, and I envisage that there will be an opportunity for the council members who represent Central London to, at invitation or request, however you want to put it, to attend at local law society when they're asked to do so, and to give a report and conduct themselves in the way we do at the moment. I don't see it as being materially different.
Maybe local law societies will have to change their remit area.
We have no control. Each local law society controls its own remit area. Holborn and Westminster's remit is the entire Greater London Council area. We will accept a member from even SW17, David.
I think the question raises an interesting point, doesn't it, about the relationship between the National Law Society and local law societies. And I think for many decades we've kind of fudged that issue, and I think it's becoming more and more important now as the National Law Society moves towards a membership-based organisation. I think it needs to perhaps reconsider its relationship with local law societies. I'm going to go to Simon now. Simon, can I have your question or comment?
Oh, thanks very much. And I think my comment's really, I'm not sure what on earth hat I'm wearing, but they've got sort of so many. The ex-president who would have said, absolutely, Susan, completely endorse your point about we need to work really hard to try to make the burden of being on council less, so that people can squeeze it into their lives. And that, I think, was the heart of where I approached this, wearing my hat as city. I'm not going to talk as president, which we need to remind ourselves that what council's supposed to be is volunteers who are doing council work alongside their day jobs. And I think a risk can be that it actually becomes part of somebody's day job and part of their lives. And I don't think it should be. That's not to say that I think it's wrong in relation to opposing, sorry, too many negatives there. I think actually it's right on balance to say that you shouldn't strike somebody off just because they've reached a 12-year term. I think it runs actually contrary to the whole notion of diversity. You do actually want, if you can, to have people on council who've been around for a long time. I think that's really healthy. But ultimately, it should be a matter for the voters. The voters shouldn't be ruled out from appointing somebody of their choice just because they happen to have hit the 12-year term. And I like the idea of diversity. But the bottom line, I think, to me, Robert, about all this, as I approached it, wearing my hat as a city person, is that the whole point of the work done by CMC was to say, is council representative of the profession? It isn't. And I don't heard anybody from council dispute that. It was just those who said, okay, we're not representative, but those of us who aren't representative can still represent others. Well, that doesn't fly in any of our businesses. If you were to say, let's put forward a panel for some new work, here's 5 white men, you ain't going to get the work. Even if you say, oh, but they're all brilliant and they can represent everybody. So I come to this very simple. CMC reached the conclusion, we're not representative. Let's change it so we are representative, and then get on with the real work. And the real work, as everyone has said, real work's engagement with the profession on the ground. So I think we need to suck this and see if it works. I don't think it's going to be really acceptable just to say, oh, well, it's all very difficult. There's all kinds of risks. Let's do nothing. I think we've got to be quite bold. We've got to go for it and see if it changes. And really important, engage people in wanting to be part of this law society, which means, getting back to my first point, you've got to make council less demanding in terms of work, and yet use Zoom and Teams and make people want to get on it. Sorry, a bit of a speech, right? But it was just, I thought, just.
No, thank you, Simon. I'm really grateful. I think we can all agree with those comments, and I think that my only hope is that we can find a way to work with the National Law Society to see what we can do to make sure that we don't undermine the work that is being done by local law societies. The work that we do might not be as famous as other people's work, but we are involved in our local communities and we do a lot of good work. And I believe we have a very diverse committee representing a very diverse legal community, which serves a very diverse part of London. So I hope that we will get support from the National Law Society in trying to find a way to work through these issues. I can see that Donovan is back, and Donovan, can I hand back to you, unless there are any other questions? Can I hand back to you, Donovan, so that you can finish off for us this evening?
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. And first, I'd like to apologise. I've always dreaded this, and it happened. I just completely froze. My system froze, and I'm not an IT expert, but I was able to get it back up and running. So I'm really grateful that Robert was able to step in and take up. I'm so sorry that I missed the majority of the questions and answers and the latter part of Sarah's pitch. However, I would like to say, just following on from what everyone has said, that we do need to find a way to ensure that all law societies are still listened to. They're all important for different reasons, and it's not always about size, it's about inclusion, and we've used that word quite regularly today, and I hope it's something that we can all agree on, that it's something that we need to move with. And finally, I'd like to thank all the panel members, Fraser, David, Laura and Sarah, for taking part and being very forceful, very fair, and quite renowned in the comments that they've all made. And I do hope that the people who have taken part to listen today, the ones who haven't been decided, may be able to make their mind up one way or the other. But please ensure that come the 15th of November, do pitch your vote. And if we can assist you in any way further, please send emails to myself and the other members who you have, and we'll do our best to try and assist you. So on that note, thank you again, everybody, for taking part and for listening to the debates. Robert?
And thank you,
Thank you.
Donovan
Can I-
and Robert
can I
and
just,
South London.
Can I just remind everybody, 15th of December, the ballot opens. It closes on the 11th of January. I want to thank everybody for going through all of these issues thoroughly. So I think we're all in a much better position now to make an informed decision. And I hope that you will use your vote. So thank you very much to Fraser and to Melinda and to Sarah and to David and Donovan. Thank you to you as well for sharing that. I'm going to switch the record button off now, but if you want to stay on this channel and have a chat with old friends or new ones, then please do so. Thank you.
Thanks for all you're doing, Robert.